Let's start with our top story this morning, and the royal family. And Prince William said it's been the hardest year of his life, and incredibly tough. I mean, lots of people at home. We've all probably here. We've had close relatives who've suffered from cancer. We've lost relatives, and him to get from his father and his wife in the same year, incredibly tough times. But you know, it's refreshing in some ways to hear the royals being open and honest and telling us how they feel a little bit, Summer.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I was quite struck by how open he was about it and sort of, you know, using words like brutal. But I think he does have that royal stoicism, I think, that we saw from the late Queen, which is like, I just cracked on with the job, which is also what he said. So I think he probably doesn't want it to be entirely about him and how he's feeling, because I can't imagine that he would go to South Africa and see some of the things that he's seen and have to do his charitable work and not remove the focus from him and make it about other people. But I think it's fair that he's had a moment to say, actually, this has not been great for me, and been transparent about it. But I think, you know, I hope it doesn't open the floodgates for people being more intrusive around this in his life.
So do you think that's the danger, then, that once you speak out on something like this, once you sort of, you know, pull back that veil, in a sense?
Yeah, I think that is always the problem, isn't it, for the royal family? As soon as they enter into territory, which, you know, the media might say, well, you've talked about it, now we could ask you more about it. I think what's interesting, I agree with Sam on this, is that when he made these comments, it wasn't about him necessarily setting up an interview to have some sort of up-close and personal conversation. He does it very naturally. He just answered in a very natural way to a question, and I think that's what comes across from William very much. Yep. And it is a different approach, I think, to previous generations, where everything was pretty much buttoned up.
Although you have a theory, don't you, about the timing of this?
No, it's not a theory, and no one can ever prove it. All I'd say, there'll be people at home, and not even before the revelations of last week. The thing about the royal family, yes, they go through same personal tragedies as the rest of us, but they have a lot of privilege, and you know, in so many ways, and that privilege was exaggerated to an extent that none of us saw coming in that documentary on Dispatches last week and the Times report that says that they have got deals worth over £15 million, deals with the NHS, with charities, as landlords. All I would say, it's very convenient to have a very human story come out now to try and combat that narrative.
We didn't know because there wasn't the transparency about where that money was coming from and going to. And
I'm not saying whether it's been a deliberate ploy at all, but I think, you know, some of those human stories to humanise the royal family again right now would not be a bad thing.
No, I don't think that those structures think about it in that way.
I didn't say they did. But,
no, I know, but I think that when you've dealt with them or their communications machines, actually they do try and spend a long time sort of defending their privacy, but he was asked a question and he gave an honest response to it. And I don't think they ever shirk from the fact that they do have these privileges, and it's why I think they're quite often very focused on what they can do in their charitable life to ensure that they are sort of proving value for money, for want of a better phrase. But, you know, what they run in terms of their estates, it's a commercial enterprise. It's not what they're paid for out of the privy purse.
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree. I don't think this was a set-up to that story. I'm not suggesting you're suggesting that either, Adele. But I think it's a fair point. They are a very privileged family, huge landowners. Part of their, you know, land is because they actually then can gain money from it, from contracts with different organisations. And it's always sort of surprised me, really, how often when we have the more humanised sort of side of the royal family, and of course they're people, they're human, they're going to lose family, they're going to have tragedy and everything else. But you know, they're not like us, and that actually when things don't go so well, people sort of say, well, you know, why are they doing this, why are they doing that? Well, part of all of this is they are an incredibly rich family, very privileged. It is a monarchy. They're there because they were born to the right parents on the right day.
All the privilege in the world can't protect you from cancer, from diseases, from these things happening at the same time, which is interesting, isn't it?
Also, I would just say, I would never trade my life for the one that he has. And he has a choice, ultimately, whether he wants to walk away from that privilege or not. But I don't think anybody appreciates the sense of responsibility that some people have as well within that institution, you know, notwithstanding that there are problems with it, but you're never going to get to perfect. And, you know, it's a hard job, and I wouldn't trade my life to do it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Looking to the future of the royals, and you know, and Prince William one day will be king, and think about what will his role be in the UK. Now, actually, looking at what's happened in the last week with Donald Trump becoming president of the United States, and we're now questioning how good that special relationship is going to be between him Sir Keir Starmer, when we know that some of the Labour Party ministers in the past have been quite damning of Trump. But we do know that Trump loves the royals. Yes. He loved the Queen. And you do wonder whether William could be that sort of statesman and be almost a conduit that could in many ways, provide a special relationship with.
Well, in the sense, the King,
Trump.
if they roll out the red carpet for Trump, do you think this might be one way of smoothing over what has been said by
I honestly
ministers?
don't really think what's been said by ministers is going to be a halfpenny worth of difference to the relationship going forward. I mean, Trump is quite good at dishing out the insults as well.
Do you think, though, being called an odious little man, a neo-Nazi sympathiser,
J.D. Vance, who's his vice president, likened him to Hitler a few years ago. So, I mean, his own vice president has turned a corner in his relationship. I think, what we've seen happening, which is good, is that Keir Starmer's had contact with him before he was elected this last week and now is president-elect. At the end of the day, there is a special relationship. What Trump will be more interested in is the deals that he can do, whether that's on trade or other matters as well.
What do you make of it? Do you not think he's going to be a bit miffed about the fact that it wasn't just the odd comment from one person, was it?
Yeah.
There were a few ministers who are now in the cabinet who have made very critical remarks of
Shall we just have a listen to one, actually? This is Angela Rayner back in 2020 on this show, Good Morning Britain. I think we've got it here now. We've got it here.
It's really tough competition. I mean, we've got the highest death rates in Europe, and Donald Trump is killing, thousands of Americans by giving them duff advice, and his macho, I'm all right, look at me, I've survived COVID, is an absolute buffoon. He has no place in the White House. He's an embarrassment.
He has no place in the White House.
Yeah, well, I mean, I might have chosen different words myself to describe his approach to the pandemic, because I thought he was wrong in many of his remarks during that time. But again, I think, honestly, I think a lot of this is about theatre. When it comes to it, he knows a special relationship is important. That isn't just through the monarchy.
I'm sorry,
I
have to disagree with you
about
there.
anybody else.
He's taking the course, he's had dinner.
Listen, so I worked with the Trump administration when I was in the Home Office in 2017, the first Trump administration, and he does take things personally. It's not to say that he doesn't see that there's going to be advantages, so you're right.
Oh, if you don't do a deal with him, he'll take that personally.
The vice presidential candidate, the vice president-elect, was a calculated move in order to strengthen his ticket. So he will make the deal that he needs to make.
Exactly.
But the pain and the process that you have to go through if you are already on the back foot with what is arguably still our strongest ally in the world, is you have to question whether it's worth it. But it's not just that.
Do you think we're on the back foot with him? It seems to be going quite well, the relationship.
It's the kind of student politics of a Labour front bench of calling out the US president whenever it suited them because it spoke to a certain kind of category of people that didn't like Trump. There are lots of people who are not fans of Donald Trump, OK? But democracy has spoken. We have to now do business with him. And we cannot make the job of our diplomats harder by this coming back all the time. Now, there
is no proof that it's made it harder.
The first
Karen
meeting,
Pierce, the ambassador's got great relationships there.
But she is not part of the Labour Party. She is our person in Washington.
But she is our diplomat, our senior diplomat in Washington. She has helped facilitate both the contact between Keir Starmer earlier this year and the phone call that happened in the last week. And so, look, you said yourself, Simon, it's about the deals. At the end of the day, this is about what you get round the table and you make a deal on. And that's what he'll be interested in, about how can he broker deals with Keir Starmer and likewise the other way round.
He doesn't care about brokering a deal with Keir Starmer.
Hold on.
We're the junior partner in that relationship. So if we want to keep it special...
He wants to talk about trade. He wants to talk about trade. He wants to talk about security.
Caroline, hang on.
He doesn't want to talk about trade.
But hang on. What about values, OK? This is a president who is on record for hating Muslims, where people say he hates women. He's been disparaging of blacks. He's mocked the disabled. He's a felon. He's convicted of sexual assault. A judge involved in the case called it rape. What are we saying about values of our country, of the Labour Party? Say, well, actually, it's fine. We might have said some of these things in the past. But it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah,
are we normalising that behaviour?
Look, at the end of the day, whoever is president of the United States, it's really important that our country has a constructive, engaging relationship with. It doesn't mean that you have to like someone at the end of the day. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything.
So what do we just say? Well, that's just the way it is.
No, you don't. You don't, because we have our values and we're not going to necessarily do what Trump does in America here in the UK. We're the elected government here, whether it's Labour this time or Tories.
And Trump is going to be the elected president.
And he is the elected president. But
look, you're talking about values.
People of colour and of various different faiths and backgrounds who have once voted Democrat in droves. Many of them still voting Democrat, but a number of them increased their vote for the Republicans because of Trump. So there is something going on in America about why that is, given everything that you say.
I don't know why everyone gets so surprised by that. That's because
I'm not
you
surprised
turn
by
immigrants
it.
against other immigrants. I mean, he's played this very hard immigrant and said, they're coming for you. And the people who've got less money in their pocket, which often are immigrants, will go, OK, he doesn't mean us, he means the other people over there.
No, I think what it means is actually issues around immigration and borders actually reflects, in America and to a certain extent in this country as well, is something of concern to lots of people from all different backgrounds, of all different faiths and all different communities.
Do you think, then,
and not just white people,
if you look at the
well.
Labour Party now, the Labour Party and British government could be very isolated now. We're outside of the EU. We are miles apart from politics going on in America. Will Starmer, and he'll be looking at what Biden did, this idea of hope and, you know, and equality, all these messages didn't really work. Is the Labour Party looking at going, actually, we now need to move further to the right? Are we going to get more hardline immigration policy?
Well, hang on a second. What's priorities for Starmer? The economy is the priority for Starmer. That's what I have to say that Trump says as well. It was also what Biden said. It didn't work out so well in terms of where inflation went under Biden. But Starmer's also said actually protecting our borders and having a fair and reasonable immigration system is more. In fact, I was just reading the other day, there's been more returns in the last period than there was at this time last year. So they are focused on that as well. But actually having fair and reasonable immigration policies isn't something that's just of the right. I think most countries in the world want that. It's how you do it.
Talking about immigration, one person who might be worried by the consequences of Trump's presidency is Prince Harry, because there's all this talk about his immigration status, isn't there? The documents may finally be made public now that he'll no longer be shielded by Biden's White House after Donald Trump's victory. So the Heritage Foundation have put a bid in for the Duke's records, this is sort of the visa application that he filled out, to be made public, and they haven't so far. But Donald Trump was very upset about what Harry had said, and he sort of saw it as a betrayal of the Queen, didn't he? So the suggestion is that he won't now be protected. This could all come out in public. Has he lied on that visa application about drug use?
Yeah, so I don't think it's anybody else's business but the state and Prince Harry's. The fact is, if you are a Conservative, as I am, and you have Conservative principles, you are very worried about state overreach and what the state can do with all of its power against individuals. He is a private citizen now, whilst he still holds the title of Duke of Sussex. He is not a working member of the royal family. He is not a public figure. As much as he is in the media, he is not a public figure. I don't think it's of any public interest, but the measurements will be different in the US about whether that meets public interest.
But it could be down to Donald Trump to say, let's release it, and then if he did, kick him out of the country.
That, I think he doesn't seem to be wanting to sort of display the same kind of, perhaps, vindictiveness that he was categorised with in his last term. I think he has decided that he wants to be more serious. After the midterms, he's effectively going to be a lame duck president anyway, because he can't serve another term. The only thing that I would caution is, do you really want to waste your time doing things like this when there are bigger things at stake?
I'll tell you the people that might be happy in America. News out this morning from the Bloomberg Index that the richest men in America have become even richer since Wednesday, $64 billion richer. In fact, Elon Musk in one day is $27 billion richer. What is this saying?
Well, he might have a new job as well, mightn't he?
Yeah. I mean, what is this saying about there's been a real seismic shift about where power lies, Caroline. It's like it's no longer necessarily just politicians and leaders. I mean, these tech giants, I mean, Jeff Bezos and Zuckerberg are the other ones who've made billions overnight because they expect low tax and light regulation on their platforms. They have become very, very powerful.
Well, there's no doubt that the election of Trump has led to, in America, the dollar being stronger, people anticipating there's going to be tax cuts and that having an effect. It certainly has.
It's helping the rich.
Well, you know, yeah, it's helping the rich, but let's see what else happens, because the key issue in the election was the economy and inflation. And ordinary people up and down America from lots of different communities, that was one of their primary concerns. And in some respects, you know, part of this is you know, for the Democrats to look at why it was that their messages didn't get through, and they'll be trailing over that and the knives will be out all over the place, but why his messages got through on that to very ordinary people. But at the same time, as we know, from what you've just said, Adil, already the richest are rubbing their hands with glee.
A quick mention about the economy here. Big news overnight. A lot of people will welcome this. The Bank of England have cut interest rates to 4.75%. So those people with mortgages or even looking to buy a house, slightly easier for them. Still quite high, but slightly easier.
Well, it's slightly easier, except the prices of homes are still going up. And I think, you know, when you account for changes in stamp duty, when you account for other changes in the budget, I think you're pretty much net where you were before, and perhaps even with a little bit more difficulty, given you know, wages aren't rising as quickly. So I think it's sort of thin gruel in a difficult environment.
Just to say, Martin Lewis, who was obviously the person we go to...
The money guru.
Yeah, the money guru. He says tracker rates will get cheaper by roughly £25 per month per £100,000, I suppose, you've borrowed. Your fixed-rate mortgage will not change, though the rate you can fix it may get cheaper in the future. And he said savings, easy access rates are usually variable, so both cash ISAs and normal savings will likely drop by about 0.25%.
But it is interesting how it's going to move, you know, front page of the Daily Telegraph, how things are going to progress. Reeves is driving up prices, warns the bank tax and spend budget piles pressure on families, and it's talking there about the fresh rise in inflation. And we've got the boss of Sainsbury's warning that we could see higher prices as a consequence. So the fear is about how this is going to hit people in the pocket.
Yeah, look, I have a lot of sympathy because these are hard decisions to make, and the Chancellor would have gone in sort of thinking about what her priorities were, and she talked about working people and working families, and the rhetoric and the narrative is there. The problem is what she's hoping to achieve doesn't match the rhetoric and the narrative, and she might have to think about, again, what she's doing in terms of borrowing and tax rises, because it has spooked people, and kind of changing the thresholds on salaries and the national insurance increases, that's also spooked business. So these are very big macro things that don't necessarily relate to what an individual is feeling. But net, the only other thing that she could have done at this point was put money on income tax, and it would have applied a lot more pressure. But perhaps if she had done that, it would have led to higher growth.
I mean, the inflation is at, what is 1.75% at the moment. We've got a target of 2%. The Bank of England has looked at the overall picture and thought that it might go up 0.5% in the next year. So we're still, thank goodness, continuing to keep those inflation rates low,
But the thing is,
lower than they were.
Do their supermarket shop and things are starting to get more expensive.
But they have gone down. The inflation has gone down, and it's not. They're not expecting to trigger up enormously based on the budget outcome. But they've also said, as part of their analysis, is that actually there will be some growth as well. A lot's riding on this budget. You know, we've talked about this on the programme before, but she has made some choices, and we'll have to see how those goes. It is definitely her budget. She owns it going forward, but people will be watching.
One thing we should talk about is the pharmacies. Hundreds of pharmacies in England could be at risk of closure before Christmas, and that's due to the budget having an impact on the sector. You know, they're having to pay the increased national insurance contributions. And there's a worry, isn't there, about how it will affect businesses like pharmacies, like GP surgeries.
Yeah, the worrying thing about this is, you know, the government offers a rebate to public services on national insurance rises, but it doesn't necessarily cover all of it. And so it has exacerbated an already difficult situation. But what I find more worrying is that we had this idea that we were going to depend more on pharmacies to do the smaller bits that you're not going to be able to get in terms of GP appointments.
Well,
to
we
try
were
and take
talking
that
about the
pressure
number
off.
being limited per day of GP appointments, which is going to add to the pressure.
So you've got that, and then you've got pharmacies closing, and it's almost as if we don't really understand what's happening in our own network. So we can't, you know, we have to think about these things a little bit more closely, and I do wonder whether actually having increased income tax would have been something that people would have worn more in the short term, rather than having these unintended consequences down the line of the budget.
So it is something for all employers, but at the same time, when pharmacies are providing services on behalf of the NHS, they are paid for that. It's not done for free.
OK. Interesting law being discussed in Australia at the moment, and it's getting a lot of support from 6 Australian states and 2 territories that have endorsed the Albanese government's plan to ban social media for children under the age of 16. It's not been passed yet. I think they'll now start discussing that. I didn't think it will even get this far, but clearly there's a real... I mean, Australia, as a sort of society, are pretty good on this stuff, and they're always kind of lead in this area a little bit. I mean, does that feel a bit drastic to you? Under 16, Salma? Do you have children? Do you have nieces?
I have children. One's 8 and one's 2.5, and the 8-year-old's already started asking for a phone, and she keeps trying to, you know, take our phones and look.
So you're going to have to fight that game for 8 years.
But so it's really easy if I say sorry. The government is not going to let you do it.
Well, that's a very good point. That is a good point, though.
To sort of, you know, make use of smartphones at an older age.
So we have had the Online Safety Act, and it is still progressing in terms of being implemented. And Ofcom is the regulator that governs that. And there have been lots of things around age assurance, appropriate content, and we haven't seen the effects of that yet. Before we did anything drastic, like a ban, I would like to see how that is progressing. I think most people understand, most legislators, regulators understand that there's always been this negative aspect of social media. I mean, even I feel it. It's not just about teenagers, young people. But I think we need to understand how that is progressing before we do anything.
Carol, I mean,
it does need everyone on board, doesn't it? If you've got a class of children, you need sort of all of them to be in agreement with this.
I think we're so behind the curve on this, not just in this country but worldwide. We know the damage that has already been done to young people. We can see people in their 20s of the damage that's been done in their teenage years because of the sort of access things they had on these phones. Children do not need all the apps, all the attributes that you can get on a smartphone. They don't need that, and they haven't been. Let's be clear.
The rest of us
no, we don't. We don't. I think I'm going to go retro and go back. Actually, you know. But I mean,
landline.
One of those big ones like that. You know,
with a wire.
But I mean, you know, seriously, it's like the damage has already been done. We are now trying to catch up. And I don't know whether a ban is the idea. I definitely support schools that are taking action with the support of parents to ban it there.
We are out of time.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you very much, Salma.
Thank you.